Thank you for inviting me to be here. It's so good to see some familiar faces in 3D, and it's so good to be spending some time with you all today in person. This is just really exciting. I know we're gonna try to shorten our panel just a little bit to make sure that we get ourselves a little bit back on time, but I do want to just take a minute to remark upon the Secretary's and Undersecretary Hogan's comments. There is $500 billion of investment through these three last actions legislatively through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS bill, and the IRA or the IRA. And as you notice, the Secretary is certainly focused on, as is Undersecretary Hogan, on implementation and changing the world and making an impact. And we are so grateful to be a part of that. I think this is an unparalleled time for clean energy. For that, as they say, the clean, secure, resilient, and affordable energy system to get 2,000 gigawatts by 2035. This is an all hands on deck, but importantly, I want to just remark that this is not just solar and wind. Those are super, super important aspects of this. But I think this is a little bit of what this panel is about. This is not just solar and wind. We have to meet all four of those corners of what our new energy system is going to look like. Again, clean, secure, resilient, and affordable. And so I am really excited to be here. I don't think I was going to make a few remarks about climate, but I don't think I need to in this room. I think we're all very aware of the urgency of this moment. And I think I will really start to go into this straight away. We're going to go, because I sat in the wrong seat to begin with, we're going to skip over Xiaolin to begin with and go through Joy and Sunita and Anne, and then we'll come back to Xiaolin, and then I'm going to ask the group some questions. We'll get into more of a discussion. I'm really excited, and thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. So starting with Joy. Fusion has been around as a science for decades, but has yet to achieve this net positive energy. We've constantly heard that it's 20 years away. Tell me what you think about this assessment. Since 20 years away is like a little bit too late, really. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so the quick answer is that we're 3 years away, not 20. And for those that are a bit less familiar about fusion, it's a type of energy that powers all of the stars in our solar system, including our sun. So what we're doing at Commonwealth Fusion Systems is trying to figure out how do you put a sun in the bottle and do that on Earth. And the way that fusion works, you're taking the lightest atoms on the periodic table, hydrogen, and you're fusing them together. That works in the sun and the stars because it has a massive amount of gravity. We don't have that much gravity on Earth, so we're doing that with what we call a magnetic bottle or a tokamak. So the reason why CFS is only 3 years away instead of 20, that we're taking advantage of the new material science development for superconductors called HTS or high temperature superconductors. And that allows us to build the strongest magnets for fusion ever been built around the world. We actually proved that out at scale last summer. So that was really the first big milestone for the company. And then now we're marching towards our goal of building a device called Spark. It's being built about 30 miles west of Boston. We are about 6 weeks away from moving into our factory to start making many of these magnets for Spark. And then we also on that same site have a construction project to actually build the tokamak hall and all the supporting infrastructure that will get Spark operational. So yeah, in 2025, that is our goal to turn on Spark and to prove net positive energy for the first time ever.
Pretty awesome. Thank you. I'm going to go next to Sunita. And Sunita, I'm going to ask you a little bit about hydrogen. It is all the rage these days. Everybody's talking about hydrogen worldwide. And you've been in this industry, both in business and in government for decades now. So thank you for your service and thank you for your work. I want to just ask you, why is this interest so intense right now? What's going on in the industry? Just give us a little taste of it.
Well, thank you, Lee. And maybe if I can ask, just on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very familiar with hydrogen, how many people are a 5 or above? Okay, well, but I've been at DOE 19 years now, and I still remember when I moved from industry, this is a true story, it's unbelievable, but I worked on fuel cells at United Technologies, and some people thought I was moving to NIH instead of DOE, and I was always perplexed, and it turns out they thought fuel cells were the same as stem cells. Just education is really helpful. So big thank you, Maria and Valentine, for the invitation here. It's a real honor to be here. But if you ask why hydrogen, I think there's 3 main reasons. One is versatility. So it's often called the Swiss Army knife of energy. So the fact that you can make it from diverse domestic resources, renewables, just like water, nuclear, fossil, and you can use it for so many end uses. So you can store energy, you can use it as a fuel, as a feedstock to make ammonia, steel. Steel alone accounts for 7-8% of total emissions globally. And so the second reason is basically countries are recognizing that in order to meet their climate goals, they can't rely only on electrification. They need that carbon-free molecule. Heavy duty transportation, all those places where you can't electrify. So there are huge strategies. We just released our national strategy, and we have 9.5 billion now specifically for hydrogen. We heard about the hydrogen hubs. And then finally, I think the other big reason we're seeing so many countries interested is just the cost of renewables has declined. And so the cost of hydrogen is now starting to be more competitive. There's still a lot of challenges, but in a nutshell, that's some of the main reasons there's so much.
Yeah, I want you to actually follow up a little bit. I want to ask you about some of those challenges, but I know the cost of hydrogen. You all have a hydrogen shot. There's a goal there to get the cost down. Would love for you to hear about that, but also what are some of the challenges?
Okay, and so and Kelly, of course, when she was our acting assistant secretary, helped to launch the hydrogen energy Earth shot or hydrogen shot. And this was directly in response to President Biden's request to our secretary last year at the climate summits. What can we do to really accelerate progress towards meeting our climate goals? And it's supposed to be, like the moonshot from half a century ago. So these really bold, ambitious goals to galvanize the community. And so hydrogen shot, easily articulated. Well, maybe I should ask, how many people have heard of hydrogen shot? Okay, good. So, well, maybe. So it's 111, easily articulated goal of $1 for 1 kilogram of hydrogen in 1 decade. And today, hydrogen from renewables, again, there's lots of assumptions here, but depending on the cost of electricity, can be around $5. So if we can, and hydrogen from natural gas, we already produce like 10 million metric tons of hydrogen. It's $1.50 or so. So if we want to be competitive, we have to get below that for clean hydrogen, zero emissions hydrogen. So it's all hands on deck. We're working on, how do we actually get the cost down, mobilizing the labs, industry, universities, we have consortia. There's just so much going on. So hydrogen.energy.gov, a little commercial there. We're also hiring. Hydrogen shots is the big focus area. In addition to the hubs, it's not just research, but we have to get to scale.
Awesome, and an 80% reduction in cost is like similar to solar and energy storage and wind in that same time frame. So it's not an impossible shot, although it is a bit of a challenge, I'm sure. So Anne, we're going to switch over now to fission energy. And I would love for you to just start us off with what is the difference between fission and fusion, and then I'll ask you another question.
Sure, thank you so much. So as Joy explained, fusion is all about taking the lightest elements that are known in the periodic table and putting them together to build up heavier elements, taking hydrogen, fusing them, releasing energy, and then getting helium. Fission is on the other end of the spectrum, right? So the fuel for fission is rocks. It is uranium. It is the heaviest, one of the heaviest elements that we have in the periodic table. And the idea there is that by breaking that up through nuclear reactions and interactions, you're also releasing tremendous amounts of the atomic energy in that action.
Thanks. I needed you to tell me that because I looked it up online. Like, what exactly is the difference? But I don't need to hear from you. What are some of the special attributes to where fission energy can really be used in conjunction with other low carbon energy or no carbon energy technologies like solar and wind and hydro?
That's a great question, and as everyone in this room knows and online joining us as well, if we're gonna solve the climate problem, we need all the tools to be put to use as quickly as possible. And so it's really not either or, it's gotta be about and. So where does nuclear fit in? Fission is extraordinarily important in concert with other clean energy and low carbon sources because it is steady, it is reliable, it is 24/7 carbon-free energy, it's dispatchable, it's carbon-free where you need it, when you need it, you can scale it down, you can scale it up, right? Historically, it's already played such an important role. Looking globally at 50 years of having fission as part of our mix, now contributing about 40% of carbon-free energy around the world, close to 50% in this country. Without that, we would have had a tremendous amount of more carbon in the atmosphere. So we know we can scale up in that fashion, but it's also tremendously flexible. And I'm glad you mentioned versatility, Sunita, hydrogen, because fission at its heart is a source of heat. So it can help us not just decarbonize the electricity sector, but also help us decarbonize transportation by the generation of fuels, can help us decarbonize industry with process heat, and even agriculture, because we need high heat to produce ammonia for fertilizer.
Agriculture being one of the top 5 contributors to greenhouse gas in our economy. And so glad you're thinking and brought that up. Xiaolin, hi, nice to see you. So I want to go a little bit about, talk a little bit about, we've talked about the application in industry, but I want to go back to the beginning to academia. And so I wanted to ask you, as your role in academia, it's often where a lot of these brilliant innovations start, right? And where we come up with the really big ideas, out of the box technologies to really bring along the development and the commercialization, and ultimately the deployment of these technologies. Can you talk to me about the role of academia as you see it, and in this continuum, and about bringing ideas to market? How can we accelerate this process?
Kelly, as you mentioned, academia is really the beginning of many things. We see where the suppliers of knowledge, technology, and the payments that can feed into this global energy transformation. And if we see about this technology transformation, which is really critical, right? We have ideas that come from the lab, come from the interactions of students with different backgrounds. And the next step is they probably will think about the startup or a patent. Then we really need to help them to understand the big landscape of energy, the challenges of scaling up, right? Doing something in the lab, doing 1 centimeter square scale to a millimeter scale to gigawatt, right? That's totally very different. So we will encourage students to interact with industry and the government, right? To learn about how to do things at the scale and what are the challenges when they bring technology from that to larger scales, and also have mentorships, mentors from industry, from government who have succeeded in that technology transfer and show them what to do. I think that's going to be very critical for the technology transfer.
I love that you just mentioned mentorship, because I wanted to talk a little bit, shifting a little bit towards, we know we need to have expansive and diverse workforce. And it's actually a supply chain problem that we have in industry and in government and across academia. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the workforce issues and how you're seeing some of the challenges for some of the early stage folks, early career or students in that space.
Yeah, I think we hear everybody is hiring, right? We need the people, especially when we look at those new energy sectors. They require people who are not trained traditionally in a particular engineering, mechanical or chemical engineering. We need them to have a broad perspective, like a portfolio about different understanding of energy. At the same time, we also require them to have a deep understanding about a particular subject. We always talk about the T-shape, right? The depth and the breadth. And I heard one of my colleagues said another one is really about entrepreneurship, right? they have to think about solving real world problems rather than just gaining knowledge, right? So it's really a C shape or complex shape of all the students. So for the workforce, they're like one practical challenge is we're competing in a way with the popular computer science, right? I think roughly 1/3 of the undergraduate students want to go to computer science, right? So what we need to show the students is really the exciting and the opportunities in this energy landscape, right? What they can do, they can make real impact. Like what Sharon showed, right? They're really impacting people that the poor and they need this kind of energy more than anyone else. I think our students are very eager to do those type of impactful work. So we need to see a lot of role models like Shara or see success stories so that we can attract a very diverse population of students who work in the energy sector.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that there is competition across industries. There's also competition across business, government, and academia as well. And I just wonder, as we work our way through this continuum of bringing technologies to market, and I'll open this up to we'll start the fun discussion part, where I just would love to hear from you. How can we better close the gap between that continuum? How can we better coordinate across academia, across government and business? You want to start, Joy?
Sure, I'll start off. So a little bit of background, CFS spun out of MIT about 4.5 years ago, and we have a collaborative partnership with the Plasma Science and Fusion Center across the street from Anne's office. And we through that collaboration, we've been able to have joint IP, joint patents together, really bringing academia and private sector together, which has been, I think, hugely beneficial. I think for CFS, it allowed us to be a startup born at scale. So on day one, we had this wealth of knowledge at our fingertips, all of the decades worth of research that has gotten us to where we are today with fusion. And then for myself on the operations and the manufacturing side, it meant that on day one I had this fantastic lab space that already had nitrogen plumbed into the walls. I didn't have to worry about that. So I think that has been a really unique model that we've started with MIT. I think doing more of those types of collaborations across private companies and academia will really help accelerate the industry.
And so how did you find out? Is it just because you worked right across the street from Anne, or like how does this get started? How do we germinate these ideas of collaboration? And Sunita, I'd love to hear your perspective also from a government perspective, sort of in between the two of the academia and the industry.
I think maybe one example I'll mention is our national labs. We have 17 national DOE national labs, 50 Nobel Prize winners, I think several members here. And so one example, for instance, one of our labs, Los Alamos, has minority serving HBCU sort of Black colleges, minority serving institutions program where they bring in students and then train them. And part of it's awareness. In fact, I brought my anti-fuel cell here for it's lack of awareness, going back to the stem cell issue. And it's a nascent industry, and so how do we get people that we train? Again, this is the heart. We have hydrogen, for example, on one side, air on the other side, and electricity directly. No combustion, completely zero emissions, very high efficiencies, modular, scalable, small enough to power a laptop, large enough to power a building or a truck. I mean, it's amazing technology. And this size, by the way, we've been funding this for decades. All started with our national labs, going back to NASA. This size is about enough to power a light bulb. So we still need to reduce cost, durability, there's lots of challenges. It's not there yet, but there's just such amazing, innovation opportunities. So as we think about how do we bring people in our consortia, so we have internships, bringing them into the national labs, exposing them to, again, pipeline from university labs and then to industry. That's just one example. And then we collaborate with multiple countries. So we have over 20, 25 countries, and we established this early career network, which now has over 34 countries, completely run by students, postdocs, early career professionals. So again, when you have such a specialized field, for instance, like hydrogen and fuel cells, there just, there's just not enough of a pipeline there. So I think the awareness is the first step, and then giving them opportunities, internships as a few examples.
And yeah,
No, thank you. I might jump on because you mentioned the national labs and really about framing the problems and making people aware of the problems and how they can participate in being part of the solution. When you think about advanced nuclear, Idaho National Lab is playing a really critical role as using their desert site as a host for numerous companies to come and sort of test out and place and site these advanced nuclear systems and these advanced reactors. So it's exciting because can we frame that and get new engineers and new scientists, interested in those exciting systems that are inherently safe, passively safe, extremely valuable for powering a data center, for example, low carbon. But then can we also get this next generation excited about what goes beyond the technology? And one of our award winners talked about that is serving underserved communities, right, that are going to be disproportionately affected by climate change. And so nuclear is tough tech, fission is tough tech. It's going to take folks who are sociologists, anthropologists, lawyers, folks who understand behavioral science, folks who understand communication and reaching out to communities and helping them understand value propositions for the technology. So I love framing the challenges, really being so inclusive, bringing everyone in of all sorts of backgrounds. We need the portfolio jobs, as one of the speakers talked about, because there's so much to these challenges in the technology and also just how we translate that for the benefit of communities.
and thanks for bringing up diversity and equity and inclusion. Xiaolin, the same question still is open for you, but I would love to also now start to transition into sort of what are we all doing? I mean, we are the subjects of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but would love to hear if you have any tips for me or for the audience here on what your organizations are doing to really enhance DEI.
Yeah, and DEI is so important. I think the first thing we need to do is listening. So we have a lot of town hall meetings to listen to the people's feeling or perspective on this topic from all kinds of background, understand their concerns, understand their suggestions, etc. I think that's the first step we have been doing. We have been listening a lot, and then in some of those town hall meetings, I was personally surprised about some of the students. They feel they don't belong here. They feel they have to bear the burden to be the role model for their kind of ethnic groups. And that was just kind of heartbreaking for me to see being a student and well being shoulder all the burden for being the role model. I think the second is recognize and acknowledge the need of DEI. So we have informing DEI committees at a very different levels, from department to the school level. And for every hiring at the faculty level, we'll have a DEI committee, and that will look into and then to encourage and underrepresented minority to apply and help them through the process. I think from listening and then helping and participating in this process, and that we can help with this problem.
Yeah, sometimes we just want to focus on our science and our technologies and our jobs. We don't want to have to focus on, making sure that we can assimilate into the workplaces that we've chosen. And so I feel you on that. I would love to open this up. What about other systemic, programmatic work that you all are doing in your professional or personal lives?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned, I feel that a lot. It's like, I just want to go to work and do my job.
Yeah.
Right, but I think it's also knowing that I come to work as a woman, as a queer woman, and what that means for me in my day-to-day. And I think a lot of my career, whether it's been at CFS or the decade that I spent at SpaceX, a lot of it was focusing on building communities within those companies. So at SpaceX, I founded the Women's Network and also the LGBT employee resource groups. We just kickstarted our LGBTQIA ERG at CFS just a month ago.
That was like a DOE sentence with all of those acronyms.
Yes, lots of words. Yeah, and then I think one thing that really drew me to CFS from the beginning, and I think it's like really important for folks that are just starting out your careers, going into industry, or you have, the ability to really sway the culture at your company, is that, this matters a lot to all of us. This matters exceptionally to Gen Z, folks that are getting into the workforce right now. So I think to ignore the culture, to ignore this sense of, bringing inclusion and belonging to the workplace will do you a disservice. So I think for me, making the job switch from SpaceX to CFS, I was really looking for a company that would have the same level of, mission-driven people, like brilliant, passionate people working on things. But I was also looking for a company that would be bringing, a sense of kindness, of, being able to treat people well. And so when I was interviewing at CFS, I got connected through a mentor of mine, and one of the first things I said was like, hey, I'm noticing right now that the only picture on your website is 6 white dudes. What are your thoughts on this? And to the founders' credit, they like very much care about DEI. They wanted to create a culture where everybody could come to work, bring their full self to work, and feel included. And I think over the last 4+ years, we've been building out this company. We're now 360 people, and like we have this environment where people feel comfortable to bring themselves to work, and to truly be themselves. And I think that actually makes it easier for me to do my job, because I know that I'm respected and appreciated and feel included in the work.
I love that, and thank you for your passion around this subject. Bringing your whole self to work is so important if we're going to have a new set of solutions to the same old problems that we've had, right? So it's not just diversity of women, it's diversity of gender, it's diversity of race, it's diversity of thought and background and purpose. And I truly believe, and I think we just saw there were some statistics with a more, not just diverse, not just different people in a room, but a different set of different people in the room being included and belonging and feeling like they can bring their whole selves brings about a better solution. I think Sunita's heard me say that just 1,000 times or more, but would love to hear from the rest of the panelists what they're thinking.
Sure, and again, this is such a great time at DOE government. We saw our Secretary of Energy, great leaders. There's so many examples. We have diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility plans that went up with our funding opportunity announcements. We have community benefit agreements, just setting the framework. And then internally too, we have like the Power Hour. We have so many different groups, and it definitely resonate with. We don't have 2 brains, one for work and one for home, and it's just a lot of effort to like have different brains. And so I think just on the personal side too, just recognizing, I'm sure everyone's had various hardships. I remember one time when someone refused to shake my hand. It was that in this day and age, it was a big meeting, and I was kind of the chair, and I was supposed to be welcoming people. And so, and just going back personally, but thinking through it, I was just really inspired by so many of the talks that my father actually, and it's not just women, it's everybody. And my father came on a cargo ship from India, without a penny, and ended up getting a PhD from Michigan State University, ended up working for the United Nations. It's always about, giving back to others. And my mother got a PhD back in the 60s before she got married, and physics was very hard. And, she also experienced a lot. So, just feeling so fortunate that my sisters and I, we were able to, grow up here, and that constant feeling of trying to give back. And that's why, this is such an amazing organization. So I think there's so many opportunities, but how do we make sure that we sustain it? Like you said, we tend to just keep thinking about our work, and so making that concerted effort to constantly look for new ways and lifting people up. So I think it's a really exciting time. So thank you.
It is.
No, thank you. So I don't want to really, I think, continue on specifically what we are doing or what MIT is doing. We're following a lot of these patterns. I think the way to sum it up is it's not just climate change out there, it's climate change in here. It's academic climate change at universities, it's cultural climate change, organizational climate change. But I just want to pull onto this theme of how do we connect it with what we're doing. I think in our tech spaces, there's tremendous opportunity for this because centering the next stages for our technologies around environmental justice and around the just transition is going to be very, very important. And so really rethinking about how do we empower communities to be part of that conversation? How do we reach out? How do we listen as well as, sort of explain and teach? I think this is all extremely valuable. And I think there's tremendous opportunities for doing this in fission in particular. There was just $38 million given to a series of projects which are all looking specifically at how we manage spent fuel and how we produce less spent fuel, less high level waste from fission. And there's also a number of really important projects that are going on connecting again communities with technologies to really have this conversation of DEI, but elevated beyond. And I think that's a great way of connecting to our research, perhaps.
I think we all need to be part of this effort. Every of us need to work hard.
Do any of you have any examples of how you're engaging students or early career or mid-career professionals who are not necessarily in our industry of clean energy or not necessarily in your specific industries of fission or fusion or hydrogen? How are you looking to recruit folks to get involved? Because this is an all hands on deck when it comes to climate. The power industry, the energy industry, the transportation industry, and agriculture are really a major part of what we're trying to impact. And so how are you going about finding people that are otherwise not coming to you for fulfilling that workforce need? Anybody can start.
I'll start. So we have a number of internship programs, so minority student internship programs, and the career fairs. I think examples like this really help. There's just so much online. Kathleen Hogan mentioned the energy core. We get so many resumes, but I still think that something more needs to be done. So I think the fellowships, we just started a new initiative called GEM Fellows. So that's also from historically Black colleges, universities, and SIs. So I think the more we promote, many times it's word of mouth as well. So again, our labs, the industry, those are the kinds of things with our fellows, we started, when I first became director, started bringing in fellows that we realized our program, and so many of them have become feds now or gone to industry. So that's also a really good, concrete example. Anne?
So glad you mentioned word of mouth, really changing the narrative, talking to each other. This event is extraordinarily important. For those of you out there who interact with undergraduates, what we've seen that really can pull undergraduates into nuclear, a space where they might not think about that for graduate school, for example. We've seen the role of the undergraduate advisor as being tremendously important. So it's really an action we can all take away to sort of learn about what we're all doing together, learn about the differences and celebrating all of that, and showing and explaining and helping the students that we advise know about those many opportunities that they might not think of otherwise. And so I think that's what I'd add to the word of mouth is really powerful, and we are so powerful to have that platform.
I see here at least 2 means we're doing that to recruit students into energy sectors. One is through curriculum development. For example, we have a class called Understand Energy. And this is a class that talks about all types of energies, from carbon sequestration, wind, solar, hydrogen, nuclear, etc. And that really helps students to understand the exciting and the landscape of energy. And the second is to help to foster student communities. So we have different initiatives on campus, including hydrogen, carbon storage, carbon capture, etc. And then we will, for each topic, we have student clubs. So for example, the hydrogen club, we have over 150 students ranging from undergraduate, graduate student, postdoc, etc. From 6 different schools. So by forming that community, we really help to bring new people on board and work on this challenging problem.
That's awesome. I know this is gonna date me, but I'm not afraid of that today. So, but when I was in school, I took mechanical engineering. There was like one little side subsection on energy and really nothing on clean energy, except for, wind's gonna be something someday, right? It's amazing to see this progress, and it's amazing to see the acceleration of this progress. I cannot wait to see how some of you in this room are going to be taking it even further. It's just amazing. One last topic, if we have a little bit of time, so this is really super fun. I wanted to talk about environmental justice and energy justice and how we think about the impact of our work ultimately on the communities that will be accepting or rejecting these energy technologies. And just wanted to open up the conversation there. Anybody gets to go first who has something to say.
Sure, I can start on that one as well. Yeah, I think environmental justice is extremely important for the work that everybody in this room is doing. If you think about historically the locations of power plants that exist around the world today are typically in very socioeconomic disadvantaged areas. They don't have much say in that. It's like, we're putting a coal power plant next door to you. This is gonna contaminate your drinking water, your breathable air, and don't have much impact on that. So I think for all of the technologies that we've been talking about today, there's this ability to completely flip that equation and say, if we're putting a fusion power plant that has, zero emissions, very clean energy, much smaller footprint, if that is in your neighborhood, that's creating jobs for those, for those folks, it's, providing clean air. I think, climate change, it is a local issue, right? It's like, how does this affect me and my family and the energy that we're getting, the air that we breathe? So I think that is hugely impactful. I also think about fusion and nuclear very broadly, as Anne was mentioning, that it's a fully dispatchable energy source that runs 24/7. So you could put these in communities around the world that you do not need to have this massive grid infrastructure. You can actually put these at the source of communities and industries that need them. So that also eliminates a lot of the the rest of the chain that is involved with energy production. And then very, very big picture on a global scale. If you think about fusion as this dispatchable energy source, you can put a fusion power plant in every country in the world, and that provides those countries energy independence, that they have the ability to produce their own energy. They're not dependent on electric lines that are going across state lines or country lines, that they're able to be self-sustaining. So I think that also will increase a lot of the equity with countries around the world if they're able to produce their own clean energy.
So I'm so glad you brought up really, bringing communities into the conversation. And so I will put a spotlight on the NEUP program, the University Partnership Program in the Office of Nuclear Energy. There's a project that's happening now with University of Alaska Anchorage and MIT to work with communities in the Arctic, because this is an underserved space. It's a space where you have to have an environmental justice framework going in, which is about empowering communities, communicating with them, helping them understand radiation in their own environment, perhaps with community-driven, data-driven measurements of their very own, and really thinking about how can a microreactor or a small modular reactor, really advanced reactors, serve those communities, serve a fishing community, serve a mining community, for example, serve so communities which may be skeptical. It's important to have open and transparent conversations, and I think that's a really important place to start with environmental justice, is having that dialogue.
Maybe if I can add, at DOE, we also have, if you've heard of Xiaolin Baker, her office, amazing individual, basically a senior advisor to the secretary, the administration. So the administration has what's called a Justice 40 initiative. So where 40% of specific federal investments would benefit disadvantaged communities. So there's just so much going on now in that space that we've just never seen before. And then we have many examples of projects like we have on the hydrogen side, and most people don't realize this, but we funded fuel cell forklifts. This is zero emissions inside warehouses. And so now they're over 50,000, the major companies, Amazon, Walmart, others using fuel cell forklifts, and many of those are communities where you have a lot of emissions, and in fact, every few seconds, some customers refuel hydrogen. So this is new, cutting edge technology that's going to those communities. We have a UPS trucks. Now we have a Project 15 in a disadvantaged community that would have completely zero emissions, double the range compared to the battery trucks. And so again, listening sessions, how do we show concrete examples where we can benefit the community?
And on the research side, I would just would love to hear your perspective, because as we know, depending on what technologies we think about or what basic science that we think about in the very early stages, if we don't think about how it's going to impact communities, it can go off the rails, right? We can have solar that's not affordable for some communities. We can have technologies that pollute communities that can't afford to fight back. And so we'd love to hear about how we begin the process of way back, not just when we're putting stuff in the ground, but way back in terms of what we're thinking about and how you include energy justice and environmental justice in research.
I think in a way is we have to think about energy innovation with constraints, with environmental constraints, with resources constraints. So one example I can think about is our capstone class for mechanical engineering. The students were working on a drying rack design for peppers for Indian villages. So normally what we think about is put it into the heater and then dry it, right? But that's not practical. So they need to understand the habit about the current village, how do they dry, and their working schedules and their sons and the schedule of their the sun radiation and then what infrastructure they have, what current material they have, right? So with all those constraints, then they design the dryer. So it won't be a fancy thing. They will use like a bamboo or wood to make the drying rack, and then they have to think about the cost, everything, and then the impact on the environment. So through those practice with constraints, they will have that mindset. They have to design something for the local community.
Yeah. That's awesome. Anybody have any questions for each other before we turn to the audience and see if there are any questions? We're all good? First of all, I want to just say thanks. This is really awesome. Awesome to be talking to you all. Does anyone from the audience have any questions, either individually? We have about 5 minutes left. Yes, please.
Thank you for the wonderful panel. We're listening very honestly to all of you. I'm Vishwa from Northern National Lab. And I think we're at this, thank you. We're at this unique confluence of academia, government, and industry. And I would love to get your thoughts on how we can improve dovetail investment from both the public and private sectors to enhance innovation and entrepreneurship with clean energy. Literally around investments and how to bring the funding together where businesses care about economics and we care about carbon and systemic intervention. So how do we make two happen together?
Who'd like to go first?
Well, thank you, and it's great to see National Lab here. That's a great question, and I think part of it is, now I think more than ever, we see so much, investment opportunity. So there's the investment community, we have government funding, in my area alone, hydrogen, there's 500 billion, there's 160 billion already private sector investments. And they're and we have our loan, program guarantee office as well. So financing, we in our my office alone, we have over 1,200 U.S. patents as a result of our funding. So these are companies, universities, and labs. And so we've had examples. One specific concrete example that we implemented is a pilot program called Lab Innovator, where we said we would set aside funding if we could get private capital investment or manufacturing funding. And that's just one example. There are many other examples, but I think the more we can show that sort of matching possibilities of bringing together debt, equity, the VC community, there's just so much interest, I think, from the corporate history goals and so forth. So it goes back again to just the awareness. That's probably why I carry this with me everywhere, is the awareness that I think so many people want to invest and they have the funding, but they're just not quite sure where to do that. So there too, I think the more we can bring together academia, labs, industry, the investment community, the more we can, accelerate that exact, solution to your question.
I think again, it's just awareness, right? One of the most immediate things that can happen right now for the climate is to keep nuclear power plants operating. Some of them are sort of being slated for premature shutdowns for economic reasons. And there's now a civilian nuclear credit, $6 billion in the new infrastructure bill that was passed, which is helping keep those plants operating. And this requires a lot of connections with universities, state legislatures, the industry, so many opportunities for collaboration. We're seeing this happen in California, where the Diablo nuclear power plant is going to be continuing. Really good news coming out of Michigan, where the operator of Palisades is going to be taking advantage of this program and hopefully keeping that going. And I just saw that the legislature in Illinois, I think, has voted that they're going to continue also 2 of their power plants operating. So going after this awareness of what can we do immediately and collaboratively with this new influx of resources is, I think, a really exciting place to start, today, but also maybe tomorrow, next week, and going forward.
And if I can add, we have 5 projects that are taking nuclear to hydrogen, so in fact, including New York. So they're 2 first of a kind, de-risking some of the first of a kind projects, and also there.
Awesome. Any other questions from you? Yes, hi.
Hi, my name is Naomi Jabari. I'm with SME Engineers and Constructors. Naomi Jabari, SME Engineers and Constructors. My background is oil and gas, and I'm asking a question about fossil fuels and oil and gas. Do you consider that as a big challenge and also big opportunity? Do you see oil and gas in the picture for clean energy using carbon capture and generating hydrogen, syngas, and synfuel and keep it in the cycle? So we can see that as an opportunity and challenge. What is fossil fuel and oil and gas in the picture for clean energy?
Start there, and definitely when it comes to hydrogen, Sean, any way to get to clean hydrogen, obviously we depend on fossil fuels. And so most of our hydrogen today is made from natural gas, but how do we have zero or close to zero emissions? And there's a lot of interest in blending, so using natural gas, but maybe blending with hydrogen, it's a stepping stone. So it's going to be needed, right? So there needs to be a transition strategy. So we're not excluding fossil fuels, and there's a huge CCS program. There are other projects like innovations like pyrolysis, where you don't even produce CO2, but you produce solid carbon, which is also a value add product. So again, there's just we need all hands on deck, and so I wouldn't, dismiss the fossil fuels and of course not CCS.
And Sunita, the Department of Energy has issued a carbon capture energy shot as well.
Yes, one of the very few, handful of energy shots. So there too, the carbon capture, right there, capture all of that.
I just want to give you a shout out, Sunita, that I love that you talk about clean hydrogen rather than color coding it. Green or blue or purple or gray or all of that. But we talk specifically about the numbers, and we talk about what we need to get to in terms of clean. So regardless of the source, it's got to be clean. And if oil and gas is not clean, it won't be included in this new energy economy. But getting that clean is really the important part. Anybody else?
I would like to say oil and gas industry have decades or longer expertise on chemical engineering, like how to do underground, potentially good impact underground carbon storage, hydrogen storage. So their knowledge are an asset for us.
And drilling for geothermal as well. So I don't want to forget about that one. So I'm getting carded here. By the way, women's soccer, prime time, 70% increase in show. This has nothing to do with anything, but yay, women's soccer is being put in prime time now, not like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Hallelujah. Thank you, ladies. I really appreciate all of your time and your energies and your trailblazing efforts to bring clean energy to our world. Thanks for your time.